You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 36 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. Hayden, how are you doing?
Well, it's December 15th. I'm getting into the Christmas spirit, of course. It's almost the holiday season, so I'm great, thanks.
Yep. Sweet. Well, today we'll be doing another one of our Flesh and Blood class deep dives with one of Fav's oldest classes, actually, Guardian. So from being one of Flesh and Blood's first control decks to its evolution as a potential powerhouse of aggression, the Guardian class is a little bit of something for everyone. But before we get into it, Hayden, let's talk about your week in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, looked pretty similar to last week. Nationals on the horizon, only, 5 and a bit weeks away. And I also have, obviously some downtime over the holiday break in there. So got in a draft this week. Been trying to draft at least once or twice every week at the moment, which has been good. Enjoying Tales of Draft still. And then just some constructed, obviously with our usual sort of testing group. Everyone's still helping out, which is great. And then it's kind of been it. It's a busier into the year, so hoping over that sort of downtime of the holiday break, I'll get to play some more constructed and work out what I actually want to play at nationals. But yeah, otherwise, that's kind of been it. How about yourself?
Actually have been a little busy, so not testing too much. I am prepped for a very nice cleaning tomorrow, which should be interesting. So. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first period of time where I've had to take a little bit of time off, but hopefully we'll be back soon and stronger than ever, and just whipping you on all of my my Kano decks again.
Exactly.
Well, this week is pretty interesting. There's been massive breaking news, which is actually no news, but no news is news. Hayden, tell me about it.
No news is news. I think people say no news is good news, and in this case, I think that's... I believe that to be true, but we'll have a chat about it anyway. So, banned and restricted update came out yesterday. There is no changes to the banned and restricted list for either Classic Constructed or for Blitz. So, Classic Constructed, the latest update was the 14th. So, as we record, literally just yesterday. The next review that LSS have said is going to be February 2nd. So, they've decided to make no changes in the lead up to the last two remaining nationals of the season, being New Zealand and Australian nationals. Given some reasoning behind this, and really that's just the belief that the metagame is in a reasonable position. That we're seeing decks that, while Briar's had a successful national season, there's been players around the world exploring, exploiting metagame puzzles to success. That's their exact words. So in particular, Old Time and Chain, and even with, of course, Kano and Lexi winning nationals, they feel that there's demonstration of a metagame that is challenging Briar, and that Briar is not, I guess, so dominant that they feel something is needed to change, whether it be banning of a card, or restriction of the card, or some sort of other change that we discussed in our community hot seat episode. And I think from that episode, right, Brendan, we were pretty happy that the current state of the meta is pretty healthy, and there's a lot of ways there's at least some ways to be attacking Briar, as well as ways to build decks that allow you to still probably play a lot of the heroes that you want to. And yeah, I think it was expected that probably there wouldn't be any changes this time around. But again, LSS have said February 2nd, post those two national championships before the release of Everfest. It looks like there's going to be another review.
Yeah, what are your thoughts? Or I know you said it was good news. I'm assuming you're in favor. But do you think that there's anything that potentially needed to be banned in Classic Constructed or Blitz?
Yeah, so Blitz is one for me. So I was maybe, if there's any surprises for me, maybe Duskblade not being banned in Blitz. Although we saw a Blitz season in terms of Skirmish Season 3 where, a lot of different decks did win, I think. So they actually have the hero win rates on Fab TCG, which is cool to see. So Briar did have the most win percentage at 37, but then it's not actually another Runeblade for 4 heroes. So you've got Dorinthia very close behind Briar, then Old Time not far behind that, and then Ira, traditional Ira, and Kano there as well, before you even get to Chain. I think Viscerai's not even on the list. So I guess the concern around Duskblade is obviously how that plays into certain strategies, and that could just be metagame for sure. So maybe that's the experience I've had. As I said a couple of weeks ago, my Blitz testing was basically non-existent. It's just through gameplay and through the skirmishes that I've played. That I think there's some issues with Duskblade in the way that plays and limit strategies. But you look at the results across the globe, and we've had a pretty healthy and balanced metagame, and even the events that I played in were pretty a lot of representation of different heroes and people getting on the decks that they like to play or want to play. Maybe they've changed since last season, but yeah, I think seeing those results of Dorinthia, Old Time, Ira, Kano, and then Chain, Lexi, etc. It's good to see different heroes winning the events. So look, I think in terms of, I didn't expect it to be banned at Duskblade, but I thought it probably needed to be honest. But also happy to have that roll through, and then maybe we see what happens as we enter into another Blitz season. And maybe it is too strong. Maybe it's fine. Maybe Everfest releases some cards that allow some of the heroes who are maybe struggling into Duskblade with the Rune Blades and Blitz to sort of thrive, and it won't be an issue.
Yeah. I'm interested to know the community's reaction, because I am unwilling to go back on Facebook because it's a little too crazy over there. But I remember that there was a lot of noise around changes to Briar, whether it's a ban or it's an errata. So I wonder if that's been quelled over the kind of the fulfillment of the national season, the ending of the classic constructed competitive season. If there, some of the other heroes performing was enough, but or if the majority of people still want. They're calling for an errata on Briar or something of that nature.
Yeah, I think the general sentiment from what I've seen is... So I think that's the wrong word, general sentiment. Often, there's loud voices, right, in terms of reactions to these sort of things. And I think you're definitely seeing those in terms of some pretty negative feelings, I guess, about there being no changes to the metagame in relation to Briar. So that whether that be bannings, whether that be an errata, which we discussed. If you haven't heard, we talked about that quite a bit at length in the community hot seat episode, and I think we're both firmly against any sort of erratas, just for what that does for the game and the long term of the game. But yeah, I think a certain group of people were definitely expecting to see some change, whether it be a banning, probably most likely, something like a Rosetta Thorn banning, etc. So I think there's still those conversations flying around, and I think those are healthy conversations to have in post this announcement, because LSS have given some reasoning behind their decision to make no changes, and whether that, I guess, gives people the information they wanted to see in terms of helping them, I guess, maybe come to terms with that, or they still disagree. I think to have the discourse is important. It's probably just framing it in terms of, a bit more of a constructive light rather than a destructive sort of take on it, because at the end of the day, we still have... we have 2 nationals left. It's only 2 nationals at the end of the day, but then you have Everfest coming out, and there's an opportunity for Everfest to, again, change the meta. So I'd be interested to see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, the impact of Everfest on the meta is likely going to be very high if we just look back at Crucible. But, who knows? It could, it's always, new territory, but these supplemental sets are just usually massively impactful in the classic constructed format. It's going to be interesting, too, with all of the heroes getting a piece, right? Or all the classes. I can't remember if it's all the heroes or all the classes, but one or the other. It does look like that pretty much everybody will get something to work with from Everfest.
All the classes, yeah. And speaking of Everfest, Brendan, we do officially have our preview card. Well, we don't have our preview card, but we will have a preview for Everfest, which is really cool. So we do also get to do something pretty awesome. I think we're allowed to say this.
Yeah, open a pack, eh?
We get to open a pack as well. So we have a preview card. I believe it's on the 28th of January. And then we're also going to be able to, open a pack, which I think we'll probably do live on, well, not live, but we'll do it on Time in the Round that week, so that it goes up on the appropriate day, because that sort of falls in line with when we're allowed to open our pack. And we'll see what Everfest holds for us. Hopefully we pull something nice and juicy.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't see if we were kind of CC'd on the same email there, but I'm not sure if we have one or we have 2. I was actually kind of trying to check on my phone here, but definitely one. I got the same email as you in terms of opening the pack, which is sweet. Important to note that I think that the reason that we're able to open the pack, which is super exciting, hope we get to do it every time, but it is because they are switching over to the, what would you call it? Recyclable pack. Yeah, the paper packaging. So yeah, that'll be sweet.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad to get that in hand, and obviously we had a discussion or a little chat about that in the news a couple of weeks ago. It's something that I'm interested to see what happens. I'm excited by the prospect of the change, and we'll see if it lives up to, I guess, the quality that's needed, which will be good. Moving on, just wanted to, last week and the week before, to shout out as we come to the end of the year, we start to unwind through this, I guess, off season for Brendan at least. There's still a few more weeks for me. That from a content perspective, we'd love to hear what you'd like to see from us next year. So in 2022. We do have some ideas for what we want to do with our content, in terms of the videos we make, the podcasts we do, just the general content and the extra content that we do provide. But also we want to make sure that we're, I guess, creating the things that people want to see, that our viewers and listeners want to get. We want to always make sure that we're trying to add some value. So if you do have some feedback for us in terms of what you'd like to see in 2022, ideas, content you want covered, then let us know. Either drop a comment in YouTube, flick us a tweet if you want to, or you can even send us an email to arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. We did have some great responses last week, and there's some ideas that are already sort of bubbling to the surface. I did want to say, we are 2 weeks away from the end of the year. We do have a couple of cool things lined up to close out the year. We're just sort of finalizing those right now, right, Brendan? I think we're definitely going to do some sort of farewell to Welcome to Wraith, for sure. And we're going to try and, I guess, have a little bit more entertainment come into our content to end the year, just while the competitive season starts to slow down before we get into Everfest, and then we'll ramp right back up as we head into Everfest. So that's exciting. We do have one last deck tech to come for the year, which we are finalizing at the moment, so do look out for that before we wrap up 2021.
Awesome. Well, in classic fashion, and with us ending the year here, I do want to shout out the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel as we creep up to those 3,000 subscribers. Our goal for the year is to reach 3,000. We are so close. So if you enjoy our content and it has impacted you in a positive way, and you're not subscribed, please subscribe, because that definitely helps us out a ton. Crazy to think that Arsenal Pass was actually started in 2021, and here we are heading into 2022. Mm-hmm. And speaking of shilling, Hayden, if you listen to the podcast service on services such as Apple, if you would love to leave us a review, that'd be fantastic. I think we're finally kind of pushing that SEO side of the podcast and the business, whatever you want to call it. But reviews are obviously the best thing that you can do for content that impacts you in a positive way. Wow. It's a mouthful to get out.
If it does impact you in a negative way, you can still leave us a positive review. That's okay with me. No, it's something that we've been not great at, but we're being told we need to do it more as we sort of grow. So we're getting better at it, I think.
Yeah, soon enough we'll be taking money from big brands and just saying crazy stuff. No. So last week's Time in the Round was with Isaac from the Attack Action podcast. Check it out on YouTube and podcast services near you. But this week we actually have T on Time in the Round. T, and his last name starts with a T. It's like Trooper or something. I just don't want to misquote it right now. But a somewhat local player to me. He's I feel like he was in Minnesota, but I met him a few times in the Road to Nationals season. And he has a pretty funny story because he went to a lot of Road to Nationals, and the way he calls it, he was always the bridesmaid. So got a lot of third, fourth places, a lot of second places, I think more than anybody in the United States, and wasn't able to squeeze out that number one. But ultimately an extremely good player, a very kind of articulate player as well, and someone I respect a lot. So excited to have him on. I think that we'll have some good conversations on the future episodes. So look out for it this weekend. And finally, just want to shout out the Arsenal Pass Patreon. Thank you all so much to who are subscribed. It means the world to us. The Arsenal Pass Patreon does have tons of extra content, including a extra podcast each month, live session, as well as if we throw up a deck tech on the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. On the Patreon, we do host a sideboard guide, a write-up on the deck theory, matchups, ratios, pretty much everything you need to pick up the deck and start being competitive. Anyway, Hayden, it is a bit cloudy out here in Texas today, but I do still smell that sizzle. Why don't you take us over to the Commander Cookout section?
Well, actually, Brendan, it might be a false alarm. No Commander Cookout this week, as we often do with our deep dive episodes. We want to dedicate as much time as possible to the class deep dive. But if you do have a question that you want to get in before the end of the year, then please do. You can either drop a question in the comments below on YouTube, you can tweet at us, or you can send us a email if you like to arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. Questions about the game, about Brendan's hairstyle, about anything you want. Very likely that you'll get your question on. I think we don't have too much of a backlog. So, and if you did ask a question in the past and we haven't answered your question, there's a chance I've missed it. So please, add us and remind us of some of those questions if we haven't covered them. I know there was a couple that might have got lost in comments or emails. So yeah, we'd love to have your questions and get them on the show.
It's funny because I have the notes in front of me and I can see there's no command and quick section, but I just want to keep trying to rip in those intros because they're just so fun to do. But Hayden, let's go ahead and head into the main topic of the pod. Before we talk about it at all, why don't you tell me about your experience with Guardian? Because you were a bit of a Guardian proponent, especially in the early days. I remember when I went to the Calling 2020 in New Zealand. The one thing that me and Sasha were afraid of was Hayden bringing over Guardian or bringing over Brute, which I knew you were leaning towards Brute, which would have been a nightmare. But I heard back then that you were a bit of a Guardian player.
Yeah, so my history with Guardian, I guess, is basically Guardian was the first constructed deck that I picked up. So Bravo was the first post sort of the limited calling season as we headed into that constructed calling for the very first time. I knew I wouldn't be going just because of circumstances. I actually had my best friend's wedding. So, I had to make a choice. And at the time, I guess Flesh and Blood was still pretty new to me. But I started to go to locals and playing the game and doing some testing and just trying to learn more about the game and the format. And obviously it was so undiscovered. So I was really interested. And I looked at Bravo and just thought, Anathos was such an interesting weapon. The weapons, I think, were really the draws for those first 4 heroes and how you wanted to or thought you wanted to play the game, I guess, and build your strategies. And obviously, just, I guess, understanding was so rudimentary, especially from my side. I didn't really understand much. All I knew was I had a tectonic plating. I had the cards. I was getting the cards to build Bravo. I was going to build it and play it. And I know, and I'm sure you can talk about this in the history, you can't talk about Guardian without talking about Cale McCreath. And he was probably one of the only people who was sort of, I guess, an early content creator in a way, right? Like creating discourse and discussing what was happening with Guardian and Bravo. And I had a different take probably to what Cale had, and I had this build of Bravo that was a bit more sort of tempo based. It was maybe similar to some of the old time lists that you might see in late 2021 in the national season, where it tried to often come in with Anathos or come in with I even had E-Strikes in the deck, for instance. Had a Cyborg package that was a bit more aggressive for certain matchups, but yeah, it was a deck that I really enjoyed playing. I thought there was a lot of strategy that drew me towards it. If it wasn't going to be Brute that I was going to play, then it was going to be Guardian. So it's kind of my history with Guardian, really, in terms of just the starting point. And I played Bravo for basically all of Welcome to Wraith. Eventually I had to pick up and play the rest of the heroes as well during that sort of Welcome to Wraith time before Arcane Rising came out. And then I sort of put down the Guardian when Arcane Rising came out and didn't really touch it again until, pretty recently with Monarch coming out.
Mm-hmm. Did that Guardian deck have Drone of Brutality in it?
So some builds that I played of Guardian did have Drone of Brutality in it, and the more aggressive build did, because I wasn't playing last-ditch effort in that build, and I wasn't playing this control build. I was playing quite a aggressive go through the deck build. So it had E-Strikes, had 2 red drone, had what else did I have in it? I had a package of Scarf for Scars on my sideboard as well, even. So.
I mean, it's pretty common back then. All right, let's go ahead and head into it with what makes the Guardian class unique. And there's actually quite a few things. So first off is kind of the one that's in everybody's face, and that's going to be Dominate and Evasion. We all know these huge, very popular Guardian Dominate attacks like Crippling Crush, Spinal Crush, you name it, right? So the Guardian class having Evasion and being able to go over the top through the use of the Dominate keyword is very core to the class.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we talk about evasion a lot, right? And that's probably coming from other TCGs. So if you're not familiar with what evasion is, basically it's a way to evade defensive, maneuvers effectively from your opponent, right? So of course, Dominate allows only one card from hand to be used to defend. So that causes some issues for a lot of classes, and for other classes it's not such a big deal. But of course, you also have like arcane damage. You have these other forms of evasion as well, but Dominate is the original piece of evasion, right, from Welcome to Wraith, and it's a really interesting one in terms of the pairing it with on-hit effects with the Crush, and also pairing it with a breakpoint. It makes Guardian so unique because with other classes you see breakpoints matter, right? You see 4 attack matter, or you see 7 attack matter, and then with other classes, maybe similarly you see on-hit effects matter, of course, right? So whether that be Ninja with Katsu's ability, or Mask of Momentum, or be Warrior with getting the second counter on Dawnblade, or triggering the Warrior's Valor that you've played, etc. But of course, in the form of Guardian, you have both, right? You have these on-hit effects, but you have a breakpoint, which is it needs to be 4 or more damage with the crush effect. So it's so unique.
The crush, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this crush keyword is very important, right? I think pretty much every Guardian attack is predicated on this, hitting for 4 or more. Other than Terra Sender, I think Terra Sender just comes over. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because if you look at something like Ranger, right, you just come over by 1 and you get your on hit effect. But in Guardian, it needs to be over 4, which is the trade off, right, for having such powerful on hit effects that do so much damage. Is that you have to satisfy that threshold of dealing 4 or more to your opponent.
Yeah, it's very thematic, right? You're a big muscly Anathos, Bravo, or an old time. You're a giant, a Goliath, and you're putting the beat down on. And I guess old time is similar in some ways, right? Like you have a lot of on-hit effects there as well. They just require fusion, or they don't have the breakpoints like we saw in Welcome to Wraith. And I think that's a really nice piece of design space that LSS have explored, or even a card like Thump, which comes in Tales of Aria but isn't elemental, so it's just a Guardian class card and has that that on-hit effect if the power is greater. So there's still some really nice thematic pieces playing in there, and plays into, I guess, some interesting design space within Guardian as well, which I'm sure we're going to talk about when we get into the deck building side of it.
Well, yeah, speaking of being a big muscly Anathos, no, I'm just kidding. Another standout point for Guardian is big attacks, right? I mean, Guardian is kind of one of the only classes we see that consistently across a lot of its cards, you see 9 damage, 11 damage, 8 damage, like these huge attack values, right?
If you were introduced to the game and you didn't look at Guardian, and you looked at Ninja, and then you looked at Warrior, and then you looked at Brute, and you looked at these other classes, and then you looked at Guardian, you'd be like, wow, I didn't, if maybe it took you 3 weeks before you got to look at Guardian cards, I think you'd be taken aback by the 5 in the top left-hand corner, the top right-hand corner, like looking at the cost of these cards, because it's so different to a lot of the other costings of cards in this game. I mean, how many cards cost 7 in this game, Brendan? So few. How many cards?
Many?
Yeah, 2 in fact. How many cards cost 5, right? So these card costings only happen in Guardian, which is really interesting to see. 4, of course, as well. So it's what makes the class so unique, as well as in the cost structure of going tall on 1 big attack as a Guardian might, which is something that I really like about the design space.
Yeah, it might cost 7, but it also hits for 11 and potentially takes 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. So speaking of that, I mean, disruptive on hit effects, right? We have discard effects, we have no go again, we have preventing draw. I mean, there's just a slew of on hit effects with Guardian. It's printed on most of their kind of attack action class cards. So I think it speaks to like a more core concepts where it's sort of controlling the game, not necessarily through fatigue, which definitely is a strategy the Guardian can employ, but through aggression, you're able to control what your opponent is able to do on their turn, right?
Yeah, I think it's important. We're going to talk through as we go about, I guess, what Guardian has looked like currently, but then also I think it's important that we note there's a lot of design space that's pretty unexplored with Guardian. Guardian's been pretty one-dimensional, I think, in terms of what we've seen to date, with Bravo being implemented mostly as a sort of, I guess, a control fatigued deck. Whereas we're starting to see that change, and obviously the introduction of Old Time most recently gives even more ability for that to change, I think, because you don't have these rush effect breakpoints, so you don't need to deal 4 damage. You look at something like a Snow Under, right? A red Snow Under comes in for 7, for 3, you can fuse a card, have an on-hit effect, and that breakpoint is now just a traditional breakpoint that you really would like to see, where it requires 3 cards or a defense reaction plus a card to stop that breakpoint. And obviously there's a lot more like that as well with Old Time and the Elemental Guardian cards, which I think is really important to remember. And there is, in terms of disruptive on-hit effects, I mean, there's almost everything in Guardian. You've got loss of hero ability, you've got create Frostbite tokens, you've got a Command and Conquer type effect and disable. So there's just, the Guardian really is the disruptive class of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, speaking of unexplored design space, the most, in my opinion, is actually going to be pumps, right? Like Guardian has a ridiculous amount of pump cards in it, right? Usually kind of, investing for the turn after, but we see the card Thump come out in Tales of Aria, but even before then, we had these kind of emerging dominance, emerging power, all these cards that are allowing you to, invest in this turn right now, and then on the following turn have a very good rate on buffing your next Guardian attack.
Yeah, Yeah, we didn't really see it in constructed much, and I think there's a few reasons for that. I think it maybe requires second cycle play, or it requires different types of deck building, so you are much less defensive. Actually forgot, but I did play a bit of Guardian with Crucible as well. And one of the cards that I really liked and played with quite a bit was Come to Fight. Because 1 for 3 plus at red, you put that on your Crush Confidence or whatever it might be. You're turning these into 10 attacks. You put it on a Crippling Crush, you're turning it into a 14 attack. And the pump that you're giving it, I think is hugely relevant. And we haven't really seen this class explored. Sorry, this archetype explored in terms of, I guess, going even taller with the emerging dominances, the emerging powers, etc., even the Come to Fights. But I think it's interesting to see where that design space could be, because obviously you have new sort of, I guess, that aura-based sort of strategy, which I think we're going to talk about, is getting more and more cards with Embolden, and of course you have Forge for War and things that have already been printed. Showtime,
Emerging Avalanche, Strength Sequoia. I mean, they're definitely pushing this as a potential archetype, but I really feel like we haven't seen it come to fruition yet. Does that mean it's its potential has been realized and it's not a thing? I don't think so. I think it's a weird way to play, right? Like it doesn't really fit into the current play style and the current meta, but eventually, right, there's so many tools to work with in that toolbox that I believe that archetype will eventually come to fruition. That being said, I think this all relates to a sort of more core value in Guardian, which is just investing for the future, right? Investing for your future turns. This is most easily explained through something like Tectonic Plating, the key legendary armor piece of Guardian. But paying a resource now or paying a card now to invest in the turn that's coming up, whether you're doing that on the second cycle or just you've built your deck to be consistent enough, is a key feature of Guardian. Like the cost, like if we look at the kind of the marquee card, Crippling Crush, right? Like 7 is a very annoying cost, right? Because that's going to be 3 cards, right? Unless you're having some sort of reduction or you have a tunic or something like that. But Tectonic Plating, investing on the turn prior to that, having the Seismic Surge token is going to allow you to play Crippling Crush with 2 cards, right, for that 6 cost. So it's taking you down from that break point of a cost, which is 7, and taking you down to 6. So very, very important.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to mention we can't go past without talking about Towering Titan either. That's the one we didn't talk about, but that's the biggest investment for the future, right?
100%, and that definitely the highest variance as well. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about Towering Titan. I think a lot of us know it as sort of a meme card in Blitz, but surely like that is definitely kind of a build around card. But also it's tough, right? Because your Towering Titan is going to cost 9, and it's hard to get off, and then you are definitely subject to getting smacked on the turn. That's your opponent's turn after that, and before your turn, we really get to go off.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the archetypes that can be used around that, because I think there's definitely some ways to build it and help prevent some of that stuff, and there's some great cards that Guardian has access to. But yeah, anyway, anything else, I guess, in terms of the uniqueness of Guardian as a class?
Yeah, so I think the last point for me is going to be efficient attacking weapons. So we look at something like Anathos. I mean, like Bravo for a long time, you saw a lot of Bravo decks that were built around just like utilizing Anathos because the rate on it was so good. It's 3 for 4, but potentially 3 for 6. We see this on a lot of Guardian weapons now. So Sledge of Anvilheim, if you don't have the kind of cost curve in your deck to consistently turn on Anathos and you have a lot of blue, Sledge of Anvilheim can be very powerful. And with the addition of Tales of Var, we now have Winter's Wail and Titan's Fist. So we see Guardian as a class that can be truly built around its weapons, I think.
Yeah, it's the tool efficiency, right? It's the same with defending, because of course you have these defense reactions like Staunch Response that can be 2 for 5 at blue or 2 for 7 at red, but then also can be 6 resources for 10 at red. So you get these efficiencies both defensively. Obviously, all the class cards defend 3, but then also you have the efficiency of the attacking weapons as well. And Winter's Wail, of course, is the new one for old time. It's a break point at 4, has a really relevant on-hit effect in ice, and yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what weapon we might get next for Guardian, to be honest.
Yeah, it'd be wild. You did mention something important there, which is the defensive value of Guardian's cards. I mean, this is in line with a lot of other classes in Flesh and Blood, but it's important to note that pretty much all of Guardian's cards, or I believe all of their class cards, do actually block for 3, and Guardian is full of efficient defense reactions in the form of Staunch Response, Turn Timber, and to an extent, Biting Gale. But yeah, important to keep in mind that does fuel Guardian's ability to play these attrition and defensive strategies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And on to my favorite section of our class deep dives. It's going to be the history. So Guardian's history. I would start out by saying in Welcome to Wraith, Guardian was really the first kind of defensive class that was, discovered, right? So to bring you back to old 2019, Welcome to Wraith comes out. Tall Dorinthia specifically is just rampant. I mean, you think that the noise is bad now about people complaining about Briar. You should have been there in 2019 when people complained about Warrior. It was brutal. There seemed to be no answer in sight, and here comes along the Guardian class. We pack full our defense reactions, we get our blocking on, and boom, it looks like Guardian is able to kind of dominate these prevailing Warrior strategies. We get a little bit of correction as Ninja now finds its space in the meta. We see Ninja going wide, giving Guardian a pretty tough time. But I would say in Welcome to Wraith, Guardian was the first kind of control deck of Flesh and Blood.
Definitely. It definitely was. Yeah, that was how it was being built. And I actually think what the setup or the history of Guardian in terms of the way it's been built, Bravo in particular, is how we've kind of carried on through until even recently, until probably Tales of Aria. Guardian has been, or Monarch maybe, Guardian has been very, pretty one-dimensional, I'd say, pretty defensive in nature, pretty controlling in nature, very focused on weapon and deck stacking and endgames and these big, tall attacks.
Mm-hmm. So Hayden, take me back to Haydendale 2019. I mean, you're a beautiful young bachelor, actually not a bachelor because, of course, whatever. But how was Guardian received? What was the general thoughts around Guardian in Constructed as you went through those early days of Flesh and Blood? You played those limited callings, and we started to kind of ramp up for our first Constructed calling. What did people think of Guardian? Was it popular in the meta? Was it strong? Was it seen as oppressive, or was it underpowered? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just one question there, so I'll answer. No, I can give you a bit of a description of where Guardian sat. I think it was probably, like you say, Warrior was the first sort of class, I think, to get the exposure and probably, start to dominate local scenes and things like that. Just because of, I think, we talked about this before, just how hard it can be to defend that class and playing into it can be, not as easy with Reprise and things like that. So that was pretty popular. But then I would say probably Guardian was kind of the next class. And again, just due to some of the exposure on social media and things like that, where Bravo became quite prominent as like this controlling option, and people were looking for archetypes, right? Because if you came from other TCGs, you're familiar with like aggro archetypes or control archetypes or combo archetypes. And so this fit quite nicely into a bit more of a traditional sort of controlling archetype where you played for the in-game, you preserved life, you even had life gain available to you, you had these defense reactions, you had these great defensive cards. So I'd say it probably felt like it had a spot in the meta. I don't think people thought it was dominant. They thought it was very efficient, especially at attacking Warrior. But then people started to play Ninja, right? And then Guardian felt like had a weaker matchup to traditional Ninja lists back in the day. And then Rhinar was kind of underexplored in Welcome to Wraith. So it almost like you had this kind of, it appeared on the surface like a Paper, Scissors, Rock format, probably in the first few months of Flesh and Blood's as constructed inception.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pretty popular deck at that. I mean, I think at the first kind of constructed calling, and I know we said the first constructed calling, but the fact of the matter is on the timeline, COVID hit after that. So we didn't see competitive constructed events for quite a while. But there was really the big three. There was Ninja, there was Warrior, and there was Guardian, and then Brute had kind of just fallen by the wayside, not because of its power level, but mostly as a popularity contest. It was kind of losing out. But Guardian was definitely up there. There was a lot of Guardian players. It's a very kind of competent deck, very popular deck, and yeah, I mean, then we head into Arcane Rising and Crucible of War, where we see the fall of Guardian in terms of its popularity and the rise of old Dash.
Yeah, Dash really put a bit of a damper on anyone sort of maining Bravo, I guess, as you might say. Just the nature of Induction Chamber and out controlling the control deck effectively. And I think this is where Bravo players and Guardian players had to try and pivot and change up what they were doing in terms of, the style of deck they're playing with Bravo, because they could no longer take the game long and get through to their second cycle that efficiently, because these Dash players were just coming in with, wide attacks, and there's nothing Guardian really dislikes more than wide attacks, to be honest, unless they can sort of crack back tougher, with these crush effects. But of course, the Dash players were able to basically play a control deck and play unmovables and things like this and stop these crush effects. So just the nature of these dash decks and what the Guardian decks look like early on into the Arcane Rising and then even Crucible meta is that they were really lined up nicely into these Bravo decks. And we probably had the opportunity, I think, to see Bravo shift, but it maybe didn't quite have the tool set yet. Didn't have tools to go wide or anything. You did have, as I talked about, like Come to Fight. There was some cards, some tools there where I think you could do something a little bit different, but probably didn't quite see it to the extent that maybe you might have needed to for it to prevail over Dash. So that was kind of, I think, that was what sort of took Guardian down. And Guardian had a pretty quiet sort of year or so through Arcane Rising, Crucible, and even probably until basically the Road to National season with Monarch.
Yeah, I would say even before, so Monarch releases, and I think the Dragon stirs a bit, right? We do get some of those pieces to become aggressive. We have Rousey Ancients, we have Zealous Belting, and of course, Outmuscle as well. Come into the card pool, and we see Guardian. Guardian becomes what some would consider to be a dominant force in the early Monarch meta, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of us can call back to the tournament that was streamed in New Zealand, where Dan used, I think it's Dice Jar Games. That was it, correct? So it was basically a show off between Prism and Guardian actually looked to be beating up on Prism. It was the counter to Prism, funny enough, because the tables turn a little bit as we head later into the Monarch meta. Mm-hmm. But we see its rise in popularity. It's counter to the bully of the format Prism, and of course its new aggro cards, carrying it across. And we have the ever popular Camel Creeth piloting it on stream to that big win. So Guardian was looking very good in the early Monarch.
Yeah, it got some great tools in the form of, we'll talk about the cards soon, but like Zealous Beltings, Outmuscles, these cards that rouse the Ancients, these attacks that fit into probably a traditional sort of shell to a degree, but allow it to just morph a little bit into these sort of, I guess, wider or ability to play multiple attacks a turn. And then that also helps Anathos, right? It just is efficient. So played in nicely with Pummel, where we were starting to see Pummel sort of Guardian decks already come to the forefront of what people are doing with Bravo. So yeah, really interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then here we are now in Tales of Aria. Oldhim is released, but we also get some very, very key cards in Guardian. We're talking Terra Sunder and Rampart of the Ramset. So Guardian's biggest issue, I think, for a long time, since we could argue the release of Arcane Rising, but more the release of Crucible War, was that infamous Dash matchup. But here we are. We have a tool, Rampart of the Ram's Head. Hayden, how did Rampart of the Ram's Head kill Dash? Was that the Dash killer as we all thought it would be?
I was going to say spoiler alert. No, I mean, once you sort of played a few games and realized sort of if you fit that into an existing Bravo shell, nothing really changed. The game still went long. The ability for the Dash player to get out 3 Induction Chamber and 3 Plasma Purifier and just overcome that efficiency of Rampart was actually pretty strong. So yeah, no, it definitely didn't kill Dash, despite the videos and the farewells to Dash. It did not, and Dash had a pretty good season.
Yep, but we also see there's a new Guardian on the block now, Mr. Oldhim, and may I say, this is calling champion Oldhim as well. So definitely a good addition to the Guardian class, you would argue, based on statistics.
Yeah, it's funny. The 2 constructed callings we've had post a set coming out have both been won by new heroes from that format. So Prism and then Oldhim. So it's actually pretty interesting when you look back on it. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the next constructed calling. But yeah, we get Oldhim. I guess it appears like a difficult class to build. People saying, it takes an hour and a half to play a game with Oldhim. You have to cycle through your deck multiple times. You have to set up these Oaken Old turns or these in games. It's really hard to close games out with Oldhim. And then we see Michael Hamilton come up to the Calling Orlando, and he's got E-Strikes in his deck. He's got Command and Conquers. He's got these more efficient attacks, I guess, paired with the Winter's Whale, and he's not struggling to close out matches. So we see that actually, in fact, there is a way to build Oldhim that's a bit more tempo based, whereas maybe the initial thoughts was to be really, really control heavy. And I think that's just a sort of, I guess, a side effect of what we've seen with Guardian in the past, and that's really a default sort of stance to take with Guardian. But we've seen that it can be built different, which is, I think, awesome.
Yeah, well, shout out to Michael on his win on Oldhim. If I remember correctly, I do think that he actually picked apart and absolutely destroyed one of my friends. So rip to him.
I think you'll find that friend whiffed 3 Sonatas 2 on 1 turn. but that's okay.
Oh, that's all lost to the details at this point. So let's head into the fun facts. We really can't speak about Guardian without speaking about its most famous specialist, Kalen Creeth. Probably the most famous specialist in all of Flesh and Blood, and the most loyal too. Kalen Creeth has literally been on Guardian since day one, and a big proponent of the community. Likely, if you play Flesh and Blood, and if you're even slightly interested in Guardian, you probably know of Kalen Creeth, a big guy in the Discord, always posting an amazing amount of information, right? Just all of his lists, his sideboard guides, literally everything you need to know. But the dude has not swayed from that class since day one and has seen a ton of success.
Yeah, he knows it inside and out, and I think what Kale provides to the community is discourse, right? Creates a lot of, discussion around Guardian, asks a lot of questions, provides a lot of answers as well, and I think that's so important to classes we don't really have, as well-known class specialists as Kale, and definitely not ones that have been as successful as Kale. You could probably argue Jacob Pearson, who's now a developer for Legend Story Studios in the game, was also a pretty big proponent of Guardian, and it was probably those two who really drove along innovations in Guardian. But outside of that, in other classes, we probably haven't seen it as much. A fun fact, though, for you is that the first time I played, actually the first 2 sanctioned matches I've played against Kale McCreath, you'll be interested by this. The first, he was playing Katsu, and the second, he was playing Reiner. So I bet you didn't expect that.
Well, I remember the first time I went to New Zealand, I played at an armory, and I remember I just kind of got dropped off there by James. Actually, I forget why I was there, but we had like the general Swiss rounds, and actually after the tournament ended, I actually spent a few hours at the store playing against Kale McCreath with mid-range Ninja versus Guardian, because back then everybody thought that mid-range just destroyed Guardian. It was a really tough matchup, and Kale was kind of the only one that was really pulling off some wins in that match. But yeah, that was how I met him. I think we played like 4 or 5 games there. But I just want to mention as well, we talked about it a little bit, Guardian's role in the Monarch meta. So it did look like it was going to be like kind of the top deck for a while. Because it looked like it beat up on Prism and had good matches into pretty much everything else. This is obviously before Chain with the sort of Chain final draft was discovered. But then we have a flip. The script flips, right, Hayden? It turns out that Bravo's counter in that meta is actually Prism. But I still think, despite that, we did see a criminally low amount of Bravos in the Vegas calling, as well as a lot of Bravos on the fatigue strategy, when I believe that the aggressive strategy in Monarch and aggressive / mid range was actually stronger into Chain.
Yeah, I think that was kind of probably the end result that most people came to, and a lot of people came to that earlier on, or like this kind of hybrid approach where you get in damage early and then you sort of start to shut up shop a little bit and utilize the fact that the Chain player can't use their life total as much of a resource towards the end of the game because they've already taken damage, so they can't be sitting cards and banish, etc. So yeah, that's probably the position in the Monarch meta. But yeah, anyway, should we, move on to talking about some of the key, how to build and some of the key cards in Guardian across both Bravo and Old Time?
Well, let's do it. But first, let's start me off with the marquee piece of armor, the OG L card, the one that everybody wanted to pick up. Actually, I think it was probably one of the least desirable legendaries to get out of the box in Welcome to Wraith, but one of the most marquee pieces of equipment we've had since the game's inception. Tell me about Tectonic Plating.
Yeah, I think it was probably 4th. I think probably had Tunic, then Braveforge Braces, then Mask Momentum, then the Tectonic Plating. Originally.
Oh, you think Scabbies fell to the wayside? Probably.
Unfortunately. Yeah. So Tectonic Plating, I think, is pretty, like you said in the top of the show, right, when you talked about some of the things that make Guardian unique. You have this piece of equipment that defends really well because of Battle Worn 1 and naturally defends for 2, and then has this ability to delay your resource return to give you that resource next turn. So, you have a setup to the common play pattern, right? Pitch 2 cards, come with Anathos. Sorry, make a Seismic Surge, come with Anathos for 6, and then on your follow-up turn, use that Seismic Surge to your benefit and make something cost less. Be it something like you could, for instance, come with a Spinal Crush, pitching 2 blue cards, giving Dominate, and coming in for 9 for 6. The cost of effectively 6 because you've got 1 cost reduction. And I think those are some cards to probably talk about as well, was in Welcome to Wraith specifically, those those big crush marquee crush cards were Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush, right? Because of their effects they had on the heroes in the game, and the effect they still have in terms of Crippling Crush being a win condition effectively. It's a card that takes tempo, it's a card that takes, these cards from your opponent's hand and deals damage if dominated, and then Spinal Crush likewise does the same thing, right? Comes in for damage and then also can steal tempo from these go wide decks.
Yeah, tectonic plating is very key to a lot of Guardian strategies because, like we talked about at the top of the show, a lot of the Guardians cards have a lot of cost breakpoints, right? Like the 7 or the 5. Like it's weird, and the 5 is relevant too because if it's a 5, you're able to reduce it to 4. You're able to pay the dominate, which costs 2, and that only is going to cost 2 cards, right? 4 plus 2 is 6, and then boom, you dominate Spinal Crush. But this idea of being able to invest into the next turn is just so key to Guardian's identity. And tectonic plating and creating the seismic is just the kind of the most visceral example of that.
Yeah.
That being said, we have to mention as well, tectonic plating you had to play it over Tunic, which in the old days was a big deal.
Yeah, I actually did play some games with Tunic, and one of those builds I was talking about earlier with the Guardian that was a bit more sort of tempo based. I actually played Tunic for a bit, but the tectonic plating was just so good because of the defensive value and also the fact that you could, in the late game, when you either set up or you arsenaled a crush card, you could efficiently set up a resource for next turn, which was pretty fantastic. I want to do something a little bit different, Brendan. I'm doing this on the fly. Brendan doesn't know about this, but when we talk through key cards for a class, we usually sort of go through them individually. But one of the things that I think is really unique about Guardian is that you have a lot of, I guess, replacement level effects, and also the blue cards are really, really important to what this class does. So I thought what we could actually do is just have a discussion based on like offensive cards, so win conditions, the resource cards, because there's some really important resource cards at blue, and then just some of the defensive cards, and maybe talk about it that way, which is something a little bit different to what we might usually do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting how like your resource cards in Bravo are more than just your resource cards because there's a lot of kind of codependence on some of the stats of those resource cards, right? Because you can't really play a Rousey Ancients build or a Zealous Belting build when you're going to have a bunch of Blessing and Deliverances or things
Defense
without attack
reactions.
values that are going to satisfy. Yeah, defense reactions as well. Things that aren't going to satisfy those requirements, and then that probably leads us in perfectly into our the card we're going to talk about next, which is Anathos, and that is heavily dependent on your deck build, in my opinion.
Yeah, so the blue cards, the resource cards that are available to you in Guardian as a class are so crucial. Like you see how important blues are, right? The three pitch cards, because first of all, like you say, you have Anathos, right, which really sort of shouts that out. But then also they just print them. I mean, one of the Bravo specializations is Showtime as a blue card. You talked about Terra Sunder at the top of the show. Like you have these cards in blue as a resource that is so important. Even the attacks. So you said Rouse the Ancients, but what about blue disable? That's a really strong piece of offensive attacking prowess in blue in a pitch 3, and the list kind of goes on, right? It's you've got, of course,
Cranial Crush. We got the old 6 for 8.
Yeah, and then even as you step down to yellow, I think of something like a Righteous Cleansing, for instance. That it's not a blue, right, but it is a yellow, and it's also a very, very big attack with the return rate on it. So it doesn't just stop there, Brendan, with those blues. So I want to keep with Bravo for a second and just talk about some of these. Ideally, you were playing somewhere between minimum 30, but usually people are playing like 36 to 42 blues in a 60 card deck, right? So, 60%, 70% of the deck was blue resource cards because of the cost. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but 7 cost cards, 5 cost cards, these are significantly higher costs than you saw in any other deck in the format now or in the past, and that's the reason why so many blues were played, right? And I guess the utility of these blues is really high. That's one of the unique things about Guardian as well. And we already talked about, Disable, I said Showtime. But you look as we move through into, or even actually before Arcane Rising, Staunch Response Blue. Really, really strong card, right? And the fact that 2 for 5 defense, but has that ability to pay an extra 4 resources to give it the +3 defense buff. So, you're paying 6 resources for 8 defense, and that's tall defense, right? So really good against Dominate. Really efficient because you don't lose 3 cards to defend for that 8 value. You only lose 1 card. Even Blessing of Deliverance, Stonewall Confidence, these blue resource cards that we've seen played before, because they do have some value, when drawn. Some other cards that I think in terms of just if you talk about resources, of course, like Towering Titan, we talked about it earlier, the sort of the meme that is Towering Titan. But you know what? A turn 1 Towering Titan blue then coming in for a +8 on turn 2. You're free +8 damage because you go first, something like that. It's pretty reasonable, right? So as well as if you talk about Crucible specifically, we had Stamp Authority, so another blue Majestic that comes in and has a really relevant effect, as well as some more attacks. And then
you missed out on my favorite so far, and I know you're about to get to it, so I'm going to cut you off and get there first, which is Terra Sunder. What a freaking resource card. My goodness. Probably one of the most powerful cards ever printed in Guardian. And also, you don't have to satisfy the crush effect. This is the difference, right? This one only has to come over a few. Obviously, Old Time does kind of break that as well sometimes. But Terra Sunder, what a powerful card. And if we're talking about resource cards that I love to have in my deck, Terra Sunder is number one, chef's kiss.
Yeah, it's huge. These Majestic level cards, obviously, they hold more power. And then when they're in a blue resource card, not only are you getting given a resource card that satisfies what, say, Bravo wanted to, for instance, with a 3 cost, defense 3 is blue, has a massive effect for second cycle, or even in a hand where you just draw 4 blues. I draw 4 blues, but actually one of them's a Terra Sunder, and this other blue attack, a blue disable or something, is coming in for 8 with Dominate. Still a very good return rate, and oh, by the way, you're losing your arsenal and discarding 2 cards. So yeah, I think Terra Sunder, massive, and it just shows exactly the power level of what Bravo can do with their resource cards. It doesn't stop there though. In Tales of Aria, of course, you also have a card like Awakening at blue as well, an Elemental Guardian instant. Very similar in terms of the fact that they can have a really high ceiling to it at blue. Of course, it doesn't defend, so this maybe it costs you a little bit more to play than some of these other blues we've talked about. But then, you have something like a Glacial Footsteps, which we've seen a lot of old-time decks play. Yeah, it's a blue, it defends 3, and then also comes back around in your deck, and you've got an 8 attack Dominate card potentially, so that's nothing to sneeze at, as it were. So yeah, I just want to talk about, I guess, in terms of these resource cards that we've, as we've said, are so important to Guardian and what they want to do. And you have so many options because, of course, you have your common and rare cycles, but then you also have a lot of Majestics that are printed as a blue as well. So like we said before, you could have a hand of all blues, and actually the cost, I guess, in any other deck, say like a Ninja, for instance, is huge to drawing that kind of hand. But in Guardian is actually often so okay with that because you get to do something like the Terra Sunder disable, like a Cranial Crush plus Pummel or something. So it just is what Guardian can do so well that other classes can't.
100%, and the weapons really work in tandem with that as well, right? They're quite expensive to use. They have high attack values, and you can usually come in for quite a bit of damage, even if you're not drawing the blue Glacial Footsteps or some big hitting blue. You do always have the Anathos for 6 or a Sledge or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. So if we break down we might break down the weapons a bit more, Brendan, and then go into some of the offensive cards, because the offensive cards are smaller with Guardian because, of course, we rely a lot more on our blues and things like that. But in terms of Anathos, right, it's so, like you said before, it's so efficient. A 1-card attack for 4, or you get to do some other stuff, and then you come in for 6. Not only are you getting the value of 6, which feels a bit bad to pitch 2 cards, but if you're creating a Seismic Surge for next turn, or you're playing a Zealous Belting out, for instance, which we got with the Monarch. 2 blues, I play my Zealous Belting, I come in for 4 or 5, and then I come in for 6. 3 cards for 10 or 11 damages. It's above rate, and it's also wide damage, which is something that Bravo or Guardian, doesn't have in the past. So it's something that's a little bit different, and also just quite strong, quite efficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the use case for Sledge?
That's a funny one to ask me, because I thought that for a long time. I was like, what is the freaking use case of this card? But from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm kind of going off the dome here, is that if you have a significant amount of blues in your deck, and you also are not going to be able to meet the requirement of Anathos, right, which is 2 cards pitched with 3 or more greater cost, then Sledge of Amelheim is probably the way to go.
Yeah. So I think Sledge is actually really underutilized, because one of the things that, when you say you take a deck like Bravo, for instance, one of the things that people are considering with the deck building, one of the restraints people place on is like, I need cards that cost 3 or more, because that's what's going to trigger my Anathos. So I need all my resource cards to cost 3 or more. I want some of even my non-resource cards to cost 3 or more, because I pitch them early, set up for late game. And if they don't cost 3 or more, I'm just not getting return rate and Anathos, and my deck is kind of not doing what it needs to be doing. Also, if you don't play the Tectonic Plating for any given reason, it's hard to sink resources in. So say I have 2 blues in my hand, I can't pitch 1 to Tectonic Plating, then come in with Anathos. I could only come up with Anathos for 4. I guess you could sink it into the Dominate effect, right? But the return you're getting is pretty weak. Whereas, something like a Sledge, we've seen that used against, I guess, Wizard in particular, because people will play the Nuller and Robe. So it leaves you with 2 resources off 2 blue cards to potentially have floating for any instant speed arcane shenanigans. But the one thing I think with Sledge of Anvilheim that's kind of underexplored is it means you don't have to play cards that cost 3 or more. So you can start to play maybe a bit more of a a Zealous Belting orientated deck, or maybe you do put Scar for Scars in your deck. Maybe East Strike makes your deck. The deck could look very different, and maybe Oldtime is ready to pick up the Sledge of Anvilheim and take it to town. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty cute, and I think it actually will happen eventually. But speaking of weapons usually utilized by Oldtime, we do have Titan's Fist and Winter's Wail. Winter's Wail, obviously only being able to use by Oldtime, but I mean, what a freaking powerhouse of a weapon. If you do have that concentration of ice cards in your deck, threatening the on-hit effect with the damage attack of 4, a very famous breakpoint in Flesh and Blood, just such a good and efficient weapon, and you can, of course, pair it with the old Rampart of the Ram's Head as your shield.
Yeah, all Guardians have that ability to play that Rampart and pair it with either one of them, depending on which flavor of Guardian you're playing. And it's just, it's really efficient, right? A 4 attack for 3 is efficient because of the breakpoint, and when it has Winter's Veil with that on-hit effect is just huge. I think I think what we're seeing so far with Oldtime in particular is that is kind of dictating how Oldtime is being built because of just how powerful Winter's Wail is. I think we might see that change in the future. I do think that Sledge and Oldtime could be a match made in heaven. I think the deck building just looks very, very different, but I'd be interested to see. Maybe that's how you start to build these more hybrid-based decks, as you go away from the Winter's Wail and you go into more of a hybrid-based deck, and you utilize cards, like Oakenhold and whatnot. So yeah, I'm interested to see what that looks like.
Yep, and of course we will quickly touch on Titan's Fist, utilized by Bravo when he's playing the shield. But other than that, it is, you're likely going to be playing unlikely, very, very likely to be playing the Winter's Wail if you're playing Oldtime over the Titan's Fist there.
Yeah, and Anathos, of course, just does the same thing as Winter's Wail at a base cost. So unless you're playing the Rampart, you just want to grab that 2-handed weapon, grab the Anathos with both hands, as it were, and go to town. I want to talk about some of the offensive cards to round it out. So traditionally, of course, with Bravo playing so few, red line cards, so really pushing those blue cards. Some of your threats are coming at blue, which we talked about, of course, with like Disables and Cranial Crushers and Terra Sunders, etc. But then when you look at some of the reds and yellows, I think from, we talked about Spinal Crush and Cranial Crush, those are kind of the originals, as it were, of the threats. But then you move into even some of the other cards in Welcome to Wraith that probably saw less play because of the defensive nature of the Guardians that have been played so far. Like the Crush Confidences of the world. These 3 costs for 7 red attacks are something that we haven't really seen utilized. They're really efficient, right? They come with a potential on-hit effect, and they're at a breakpoint. So defending for 1 card doesn't stop the Crush effect. Defending for 2 cards, damage still gets pushed, and you've traded, 2 cards effectively. You pitched a card and played a card, and you've taken 2 cards from the opponent and pushed a point of damage. So these Crush effects are pretty relevant. I think it was just the fact that it was really hard to play multiple. The big turn output wasn't there necessarily, and if you didn't get the Crush effect, it was maybe a little bit underwhelming, especially with Dominate. So felt like you couldn't utilize Bravo's ability. But then you move through into Arcane Rising. We get Command and Conquer as another potential threat in Guardian. And then once you get into Crucible of War, you get a few new sort of toys to play with. You get Mangle, of course, which is such an awesome card. 4 costs for 8 damage with a Crush effect. It changes the breakpoint sort of structure, I guess, in terms of blocking with a defense reaction now on just a Mangle isn't enough, and the fact that it costs 4. So you pitch 2 blue cards, you give it Dominate with Bravo's ability, for instance. The card is just really efficient, right? So it's a really great attack. It's something different that we haven't seen from Guardian as much to that point. I think only Buckling Blow and one of the other ones were the ones that cost 4, and Mangle is a lot more impressive than those cards, I guess, in terms of what it can do, especially mid-game, really threatening some important equipment for your opponent. So you're up against Dash, maybe you get to kill their Tickler Foundry Heart or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's really fascinating with Guardian because of the cost of a lot of their red attacks. There is, this sort of balance you have to do in terms of you need to be able to pay for them. So I think that in Guardian, you have to really pick your reds very carefully. There's a lot of cards that are fantastic, but ultimately you're going to have to select a few because you're going to need to be able to pay their extremely high costs, which is sort of one of the themes. But yeah.
You're limited to what you can play. So if we round it out, we talk about some of the old times. Of course, you have Endless Winter and Oaken as like the two majestic red line attacks for Tales of Aria. And so, both cards we haven't really seen utilize their fullest extent yet. I don't think. Endless Winter, of course, has both that fusion effect and that on-hit effect, which is really interesting. But then Oaken's that dual fusion card, which has been touted as being so powerful. And of course, it does have a very powerful effect. I mean, it goes to 9 attack for 3 and gets the dominate. But it gets harder to double fuse that card, unless if you don't have go again to utilize those cards afterwards. What are you going to do with the 2 cards that you fuse? So that's probably, I think we've seen it a little bit less underexplored at the moment. But of course, in Tales of Aria, you do just have more of these efficient attacks, right? And things that can have on-hit effects because of fuse. So Entangle, for instance, one of my favorite cards in Limited, 3 cost for 7, but if it's fused, the opponent's first attack gets -2. So effectively a 3 for 9 sort of damage trade there is really interesting. Glacial Footsteps with the dominate and the big attack, Snow Under. So you do have these on-hit effects in Tales of Aria. Just change it up a little bit like we talked about, and I think that's a really interesting design space to explore. And as we talk about this more and more, I just want to go and build myself an old-time Sledge of Anvilheim deck that's really aggressive.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can kind of head into a subject that I think we're both pretty passionate about when it comes to Guardian, but that's going to be styles. Obviously, we're going to break down all the styles that can be played, but I think that me and you definitely agree on one style that is criminally underplayed in the Guardian class.
Yeah, why don't we start with that? I mean, we've kind of got the obvious ones that we can touch on afterwards, but this aura strategy is something that is available, but is really not talked about and hasn't been played. I assume that's the one we're talking about, right? That's the one I had in my head.
Well, this is actually the first time that I've thrown you something like that, and you have said the one that I was not thinking.
Oh, interesting.
I was definitely thinking aggressive.
Okay.
But, I mean, Aura for sure is completely underplayed and has massive potential. That being said, I don't think it's really been demonstrated yet. If we look at the aggressive side of Guardian, I think that it has been demonstrated, yet it is still massively underplayed. Like, people gravitate towards, like, fatigue and attrition on Guardian when these sort of mid-range tempo or even aggressive-based builds can be extremely strong, right? Like I'm a huge proponent of the Zealous Belting, Rousey Ancients, that kind of go wide, just have this go again attack, then swing with the hammer kind of Guardian build, and then of course weaving into that your Spinal Crushes, your Crippling Crushes. Like that deck I think is so criminally undervalued, especially if like we're looking at the Monarch meta where people really went back onto fatigue as their comfort pick. Mm-hmm. Where picking, playing that more aggressive list and using the upgrades that Guardian got in Monarch may have put Bravo in a better position in that format, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what does this aggressive deck look like, right? Like, so yeah, to your point, it's efficient attacks. So the Zealous Beltings even outmuscle the card that's seen play in these kind of builds. It is the ability to swing the weapon on those turns as well. But then because that's not overwhelming, right? Like it's a little bit underwhelming if you're just coming in for 10 damage with no on-hit effects turn after turn. But of course, Guardian has access to a slew of on-hit effects, as well as as probably the best shell for Pummel. And Pummel is it's an on-hit effect, at on demand, right? So you turn your Zealous Beltings into a 9 attack for you discard a card. You can pump it on your weapon. You can pump it on a crush effect, and you don't need to play many crush effects in these aggressive decks still. So, Spinal Crush, Crippling Crush, for instance, if you're playing a Bravo aggressive shell, that's probably still enough. But then, as in your in-between turns, you're just coming with your weapon. You're coming with the Zealous Beltings. You're coming in with a Pummel on one of those, and it's really hard to sort of gauge what you could be doing on any given turn. Hard to defend necessarily. And then at some point, you just are able to change the tempo up a little bit and just have these big crush effects. Maybe you take a turn off because you draw the all blue hand, or you draw triple blue plus the crush effect. Maybe you defend out a little bit, you create a Tectonic Plating, a Seismic Surge token, and then you set up for the next turn with a Crippling Crush, and then you come with Crippling Crush plus Pummel or something, or you just have these huge like haymaker punches in between just really efficient and strong aggressive turns. And you go away from the defense reactions. You probably play very little defense reactions, and you just you stay on the front foot and you try and I guess put the pressure on the opponent. And you know what? If you do need to block up, then that's fine because your cards defend efficiently anyway. For the most part, you're still going to be playing a lot of cards that defend for 3, not the Zealous Beltings, not the Rousers, not the Pummels, but everything else is still going to defend for 3 in your world, and you have this like fridge of equipment on the side as well with, we didn't really talk about it in the cards before, but of course you've got Tectonic Plating we did talk about, but the Goliath, not the Goliath Gauntlet, the, I hope I don't know what it's called.
Crater Fist.
Crater Fist, of course. Plus, you play Skull Cap, you can even play Iron Rot Boots if needed as well, so that's what this aggressive shell kind of looks like. And yeah, I think it's really hard to, if you sit down across from a Guardian opponent, you're probably going to think they're going to be defensive, and then for these aggressive builds to come out, did you want to be playing defense reactions against Guardian, or were you trying to go wide? And it just creates this kind of difficulty of how you match up into Guardian. And of course, because of how flexible their utility cards are, these resource cards, just because they start aggressive doesn't mean they need to end aggressive, right? They could push damage early, and then they could sort of turtle up a little bit and play on these big crush effects for the late game.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes worst case scenarios, you're blocking up with maybe 3 cards on your opponent's turn, then you're swinging one of the most efficient weapons in the game back at your opponent for 4.
Exactly. Yep. Or setting up for a future turn with a...
So tell me about this aura build. Tell me about this underplayed, underappreciated, and sleeper aura build.
Well, I think it has to be underappreciated because right now it's not appreciated at all. So,
yeah, definitely.
So you have a bunch of auras, right? So you have from the original sets, of course, you have Emerging Dominance, Emerging Power. You have Blessings of Deliverance. You have the Majestic and the Supers. You have Showtime for Bravo. Then you have Stamp Authority, and then we get to our latest set, we get to Tales of Aria, and then we get Embolden, which is like a payoff for auras, right? Plus a build. So Guardian has a bunch of auras, Towering Titan, of course, as well, and then Emerging Avalanche and Emerging Dominance in Tales of Aria for Elemental. So you have this big amount of payoff, and it hasn't really been looked at. We haven't really seen it. I'm sure some people have built it up and maybe played it in armories and things like that, but it looks like an archetype that LSS have clearly said, this is here. There are these cards available to you. But the question is now how do you build that? And to be honest, I haven't really looked into it a whole heap. If I was to start somewhere, though, I would start with, how do I get the most out of Embolden? And can I set up turns where I take a turn off and play an aura, block out with 2 cards, and then next turn I come in for 20 damage? I've got Towering Titan access. You've got all these cards. Emerging Dominance, I think, is a great and interesting aura because it has Dominate on it, right? It gives you Dominate on the attack. So there's definitely something there. There's cost efficiencies. You pitch 2 blue cards, you play your Emerging Dominance, and then you come in with Anathos for 6, and then next turn, you set up. I think the deck building is more difficult, and maybe there's some higher variance because you need to draw the Guardian card on the next turn, or you need to play for your second cycle, so that is a potential sort of thing you need to play into as well, which maybe this isn't the right format for it. But yeah, I think it's an area that's maybe worth exploring, and probably when I have some downtime post-Nationals, it's something I might look at personally.
Don't forget the old pump and thump as well. But quickly here, let's talk about the mid-range. Talk about the mid-range build. So I think a standard Bravo list, efficient defense reactions, playing around cards like Terra Sunder, Crippling Crush, and Spinal, and maybe even setting up for the second cycle. I think that this is something we'll touch on a little bit. But Guardian is one of the strongest classes actually on that second cycle. And finally, here we have the defensive or fatigue / attrition. Those 3 that I mentioned, they can be a little bit different, but effectively a bit the same. I would say fatigue is the one I'm at least a fan of because it does put the impetus on your opponent to just kind of win the game or lose the game, and you're kind of in the passenger seat. That being said, defensive / an attrition build can be quite strong. I think that, quick fun fact is I think that Guardian Drone of Brutality was actually the strongest Drone of Brutality deck in Welcome to Wraith. But bringing it up to modern days, I mean, that weapon's efficiency while being defensive on your opponent's turn is just so powerful. And of course, you can have big swing turns with your Crippling Crush that you set up, or your Spinal Crush, or even if you've drawn a sort of natty. So a really strong style that you can play. All right, Hayden, let's transfer into how to win with it.
Sorry, I was just waking up. You put me to sleep talking about traditional Guardian builds. They're just so. I mean, we've just seen these I guess efficient defensive control based Guardian decks for so long that it's just a bit boring, isn't it? I want more auras. I want more aggressive Guardian shells.
It's so funny because I just didn't really get the satire. I mean, it's like I was just waking up. I was like, "Oh man, you okay?"
Yeah, I just blacked out.
But yeah, it's like Jesus. Somebody call a doctor. So let's talk about how to win with it. So, like I just mentioned, playing to that second cycle and setting up your pitch for the longer games. is a very, very good strategy with Bravo if you're able to do it, right? If you're trying to set up for the second cycle in games where it's not appropriate, you're going to be getting the beat down put on you. But in games that do go to the second cycle and games where you're not getting Exodia assembled on you by a dash player or something like that, Bravo is one of the strongest classes on the second cycle. You can set up kind of the perfect crippling crush, the perfect spinal turns. You can really just go crush into crush into crush into crush. Our man Caleb Creeth was, I think, the first aficionado of doing this, but setting up that deck and going crippling into crippling into crippling is absolutely devastating.
Yeah, and it's not that hard to set up either. You can track it pretty easily, right? You just need to, because your deck has so many blues in it. Okay, I pitch 2 blues here, and now I pitch a blue plus my crippling crush, and I come in with Anathos for 6. And now I've got it set up on the bottom of my deck, right, with the cards I need. So it's not even that difficult to necessarily set up. And if you get down to, because your deck's really efficient defending with these defense reactions as well, if you're playing that build, you get down to 20, 25 cards left in your deck, and it's like a bunch of blues and just like gas crippling crushes and spinal crushes and stuff. You can actually string like 5, 6 turns back to back of just these big crush attacks and just kind of take the game away from your opponent, which is really what that how to win style with that I guess in-game Guardian plan is.
Yeah. And speaking of that, let's talk about disrupting your opponent's setup turns with your on-hit effects, right? So as the Bravo player, you can really utilize these cards like Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush and actually just a lot of the on-hit effects cards to time them around when your opponent's trying to set up. It's really, really punishing to give a Guardian player kind of 5-card hands or the ability to do what they want, because they can set up kind of the perfect disruption card to play around your big turn. I mean, we saw this most painfully in playing Chain, right? Like if they had set up the Spinal at the right time, there was literally nothing you could do and you would take 1 million blood debt.
Yeah, Guardian in particular, well, actually both of them, both Old Time and Bravo at this point, really reward you for understanding what your opponent's doing. With these more sort of, I guess, defensive or mid-range styles, because if you can understand what your opponent's trying to do, you can pick out the turns where you really want to rely on getting across this on-hit effect, whether that's something like a Tear Asunder, for instance, a Crippling Crush or a Spinal Crush like Brennan said, but even it could be like a Disable, for instance. I can use a point of example in one of the games that we played on camera not long ago. There's a turn where Brennan chooses to play the Disable to challenge my Arsenal card because he knows it's important to me on that turn, whereas the attack looked kind of inefficient. But these on-hit effects are really relevant, and if you know how to pick your spots and how to use these crush effects and these on-hit effects to really pressure your opponent, or like maybe it's with Pummel as well, how to pressure your opponent with them, then you're gonna find that you get a lot of success with the Guardians, I think.
Mm-hmm. And another point of how to win with it is something we talked about quite a bit through this podcast, but investing in your future turns rather than just playing hand to hand. I think the easiest way to articulate this is through that piece of armor, tectonic plating. But just in general, Guardian is really not usually a hand to hand kind of class. It is very much a setup class where you are playing, through that arsenal and playing around your 5-card and your big kind of pivot turns.
Yeah, Guardian can definitely be a bit of an investment fund of a class, can't it? Work for your future, not for today. It's all about tomorrow and a lot of the Guardian things. And there's a reason for that, right? That is the design element that LSS explored with the Guardians. So I think to try and like fly in the face of that and not look at builds that utilize that is probably a bit of it's doing a disservice to what Guardian can do. Even if it's as small as just utilizing tectonic plate efficiently. And that's where a lot of people will start, and that's where Guardian has started. But we're seeing even more so now it start to come in with other things as well, like we talked about with whether it be like pitch stacking, whether it be with these auras that you can use for your future, for instance. I think it's something that's clearly there in the Guardian design space, and I don't expect it to go away either. We've seen it now for every set where Guardian's been prevalent.
And finally, a way to win with it, which I will very much hesitate to say, is going to be that fatigue, which is French for fatigue, of course. So not my favorite way to win the game, and not a way I think will be very good as players are able to adapt to it more. But Guardian does possess the ability to fatigue their opponents.
Yeah, you just have efficiency, right? I would say where the fatigue piece comes in more now is actually in like mid-range matchups against aggressive decks. Maybe they have too much explosiveness. But against other mid-range decks, it's the fatigue used to be like, okay, I just block out until they run out of cards, and now I think the fatigue piece is like, actually, I'm fatiguing them both offensively and defensively. So defensively, I'm shutting down their attacks with my efficient defending, but offensively, I'm like pushing these big attacks, 7 resources for 10 coming in at you, and then or 11 coming in at you, and then your opponent has to like spend 3 cards to defend it out. Like that's a really efficient trade for you, right? So the old fatigue was maybe really defensive, and I think the new way of talking about fatigue, especially in the context of Guardian, is that it's both an offensive and defensive piece.
Now, let's head in and talk about how to beat it. So first one here is going to be pressure, and we talked about this a little bit, but don't let the Guardian player have 5-card hands when possible. I think Guardian's chaining 5-card hand into 5-card hand is probably one of the most impressive things you can sit on the other table from.
I think this is true, but I think it's contextual about what Guardian you're playing against. So, for instance, against Old Time, I really don't care about them having 5-card hands. I think they're really going to struggle to use 5-card hands with these traditional Old Time builds. Even with like some of the more traditional Bravo builds, if we're on the first cycle of the deck, I'm probably not as scared about them having 5-card hands, although cards like Terra Sunder and Pummel obviously change that to a massive degree. So I think it depends on what your opponent's doing. Obviously, if they've got Zealous Beltings and things like that, I'm really worried about them having 5-card hands. So I do think it's pretty contextual, but I do think pressuring, not allowing them to set up their second cycle, not allowing them to probably do what they want efficiently against Bravo is really, really key. Against Old Time, you might have to look at a different way to beat it, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But that is setting up big turns. That is trying to maybe not do something on one turn so that they can, they have their 5-card hand, they don't do much, but then on the second turn, you overwhelm their defenses. So I think it's going to depend on probably a bit of a cheat, I would say, is if it's a defensive Guardian, you are okay for them to have 5-card hands, you need to look at how you push big chunks of damage because they defend really efficiently. And then if it's more of this mid-range or maybe an aggressive shell or a tempo shell, then yeah, I don't really want them having these hands, and I need to find ways to efficiently trade with them, right?
I would say another one here is going to be avoiding going to the second cycle if you don't have to. This is just in line with our point that Guardian is one of the strongest classes on the second cycle. So if you can avoid going there and your deck is built to not go there, it is usually better to play the first cycle rather than the second when you're facing against a Guardian. Another one we mentioned throughout this cast is go wide attacks. Like we talked about why Dash was kind of, you kind of put Guardian back in his place and tucked it away for a little bit until Monarch came out. But yeah, I mean, we saw this initially with Ninja as well. Just Guardian kind of struggles with decks that will go wide on it, especially if there's hit triggers on those go wide attacks.
Yep, I think it's kind of the baseline of how to beat Guardian. I think is go wide against it. It's really basically the way that these Guardian decks beat go wide decks is they go tall and they push their damage. So they play these, or they use their hands better. So they on offense they use these Zealous Beltings, they use these Pummels, they make sure they push their crush effects. So, if you go wide with something that's aggressive or you go wide with something that's even controlling like Dash, I think you can have a good time into Bravo. It's just all about how you set it up and then how you play into their turns.
So I think that there's also ways that you can punish Guardians decks that run heavy defense reactions. Like there is, of course, Command and Conquer in this format that was sort of a popular card to run into a lot of these defensive Guardian decks back in Arcane Rising, Crucible of War. But now we have things like Exude Confidence, which are great additions for a lot of aggro decks. But that being said, I think the most important point I can kind of sign off here with is to use your armor efficiently, right? That's got to be the most important thing to do when you're playing against the Guardian. I see time and time again people ineffectively use their armor when it's one of your most important tools when facing down things like Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush that threaten to just completely derail your game plan.
Yep, I completely agree. The armor is going to be key. I think trying to use it strategically, but also not lose it early. The earlier you use your equipment, the more opportunity your opponent has to set up these crush turns and be confident that they're going to be able to push it through. Whereas the longer you keep around that equipment, they have to work it out. How do I buy the equipment? How do I ever get through these on-hit effects? Am I just going to take a bunch of damage on the way back because they can throw equipment at it, etc.? And the last thing I wanted to talk about, Brendan, is making the Guardian players use their hands inefficiently. And we talked about 5-card hands at the top of this, how to beat it. Let's look at something like a Rhinar, right, with Intimidate. That's a great way to really put some pressure on a Guardian that wants to, maybe use 2 cards to defend and then use 2 cards on offense. Those are the decks that something like a Rhinar can shine against, and Guardian is a deck that wants to use its hands efficiently. And if you don't let them do that because either you don't let them defend or you don't let them attack efficiently, is really how you can attack them.
Absolutely. Well, due to the nature of these class deep dives becoming quite a bit longer, I think we're just going to have to kind of blaze through the matchups. This way we can keep it more high level and make it pretty as future proof as possible. But that being said, let's talk about what sort of styles does Guardian struggle into. It's been mentioned, of course, quite recently here. It does struggle into the go wide on hit effects as well, especially if it accompanies that go wide, as well as decks that I think beat it in the late game, right? We saw this a lot with Dash back in Crucible of Wars. Like Dash would likely be dragging you to the end game, but by the time they got there, they were getting so much value off their purifiers and their induction chambers that as a Guardian player, it was very hard to keep up.
Yeah, Guardian is not the most efficient control deck, although Oldtime now with Crown of Seeds and Rampart might be able to challenge that, but traditionally Bravo hasn't been. And where Guardian can struggle is definitely going wide. It doesn't have as much, once you get through that equipment, its ability to defend out efficiently is really starting to be lost, especially if you don't break the chain and don't give something like a Rampart of the Ram's Head the efficiency that it needs. If it doesn't get used multiple times in a turn, its efficiency is a lot lower, right? So I think that's massively important. And then the late game, like you say, is where you can you can actually outshine Bravo, especially Oldtime maybe less so. And then, like you say, something like a chain, something that what we saw in the last format, these things that can push big chunks of damage is really where Bravo or even Oldtime can struggle because what these Guardians excel at is utilizing their hands efficiently, defending for X number of cards and attacking with X number of cards. You have so many options. Like the options are endless, right? In terms of, okay, I could be using 5 cards for offense here because I'm setting up a big pummel, crippling crush turn, or actually no, I could only be using 1 card for offense here because I'm just going to come with an Anathos and I want to use my cards strategically defensively. So these decks that force them to not be able to play in the middle ground are the decks that that can have the most success, I think. Into especially traditional Guardian builds and defensive Guardian builds. But then if you flip that onto the aggressive side, some of these decks might not do as well. So something like a Ninja, for instance, doesn't tend to do as well into the aggressive decks that we talked about. Warrior doesn't tend to have maybe as much game because it can just get completely run over because opportunities to reprise, blow them out, things like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a unique deck, but Guardian definitely does struggle into Aura Prism. Even if you have the time skip, it's just tough to kind of clear multiple auras at once. So if they get you with the old, Toma Divinity, Toma Divinity into Toma Divinity and put a couple auras on the field in front of you, you can get effectively aura locked in. There is almost no way to come back from that as a Guardian player.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about as well what styles is Guardian or what matchups are tougher for Guardian and what matchups are maybe better for Guardian, as we're going to move on to, the Guardian is really one of those classes that I think sits pretty close in the middle. Like it doesn't have terrible matchups outside of maybe Dash traditionally, and it doesn't have any matchups that are phenomenal outside, unfortunately, Ranger for the Ranger players out there. So it's a deck that can really flex its style because we just talked about this defensive, this mid-range, this aggressive style, and have game pretty close to, I'd say, these kind of 50-50 matchups against a lot of the heroes in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get off the negativity and talk about what it's good into. So what sort of meta are you looking to play Guardian into? So like when Everfest comes out and the meta shifts, like what are some of the early catalysts that you'll see? Like the decks that people switch over to, the styles they switch over to, you're like, maybe Guardian is going to be a good pick.
So I think any format that slows up a little bit, formats that play around the middle ground is where I really want to be playing Guardian into because, like I said, I want to use my hands as efficiently as possible, whether it be on defense or offense. But the Guardians do a bit of best of both worlds, and even Oldtime, right, because of Winter's Wail and some of these really efficient attacks. I think you can play Guardian into most formats. It's probably going to depend on which Guardian you play. So for instance, I think Oldtime is a pretty good choice in the current Tales of Aria meta that we're seeing because it is really efficient at defending. It has Crown of Seeds, it has the Rampart, it has the reaction printed on Oldtime. But I think this is a much tougher format for Bravo, for instance. But if we flick to, as I say, like a more middle ground format, a lot more mid-range decks playing around, then yeah, I'm really keen to play Bravo. I'm keen to punish people with these in-game stacks with crush effects, with just efficient defensive values as well. And then, on the flip side of that, if it goes to a more controlling format, then again, maybe I'm moving away from Guardian a little bit.
Yeah, and I think I'm just 100% in line with you, and I'm going to agree with you on that one because you summed it up pretty well. Yeah, but that being said, we have switched the format a little bit during these class deep dives, and we're not really talking about Blitz as much. I think as Flesh and Blood evolves as a game, Blitz is just more of a casual format, so it does sort of slide out of the scope of these podcasts. But Hayden, why don't you give us a little bit of a anecdote on Blitz, because you actually played a bit of Guardian Blitz.
I did. I don't know if I can give you just a nice, tidy anecdote, but I do think that Guardian is really interesting in Blitz. It is often doing something very similar to what it has been in Classic Constructed in the past, whether it be Bravo or Old Time. I think we've seen Old Time have a lot of success in Skirmish Season 3, which we've just surpassed at the time of recording this podcast. We just wrapped that up. These Guardian decks, I think, because of the armor value that you have, and as a percentage of like the life total in the game, and the fact that you have this ability to get through to your second cycle, I guess in less turns, although you have less life, of course, is really interesting. So I like Guardian and Blitz. I played a bit of Bravo in Skirmish Season, end of Skirmish Season 1 into 2, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, I think Old Time clearly has a pretty interesting spot into a Blitz format that's really sort of dominated by aggressive decks in the past sort of Skirmish season. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens with Everfest and how Blitz goes, because of course we have seen, with Crucible, the supplemental set beforehand, new heroes come in as well. So yeah.
For sure. Awesome, Hayden. So as we go ahead and close this one out, why don't you give me the one thing that you hope for Guardian, one thing you hope Guardian gets in Everfest?
It's interesting. I feel like Guardian has so many tools that are underexplored that I don't even know if I feel like Guardian needs anything in particular. I would maybe like to see something for Old Time in particular that allows you to play a bit more of a tempo-based game plan. And if I'm talking about Bravo, I would like to see something that maybe enables another payoff for that kind of aura strategy. Maybe so, like an efficient attack that pairs well with the auras, like a thump-esque kind of attack, or something along those lines.
Awesome. So for me, I just want to see more aggressive cards. I think that Guardian does have a lot of aggressive tools in its toolbox right now, but a lot of that, I think we're flexing into generics when we're going there. A lot of these generic block twos. That being said, I still do think that the aggressive archetype of Guardian is very, very strong right now, but I think we could see some more aggressive kind of additions in the actual class. And that's pretty much all I've got my own. Obviously, I'm a bit partial to the aggressive archetype of Guardian. But yeah. Well, anyway, that closes out our class deep dive, or 101 on the Guardian class. We hope you all enjoyed. Shoot us a comment in the comments below if you are listening on YouTube of what class you would like to see next. And that being said, let's go ahead and get to the shilling, Hayden. So just want to shout out the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. We are on YouTube. We do have tons of content over there, including deck techs, extra podcasts, the famous podcast Time of the Round, where we get to have other people do our content for us and interview the beautiful people of Flesh and Blood, as well as, gameplay, of course. So check us out on YouTube. We are shooting for those 3K subscribers by the end of the year, and we are so close. But yeah, me and Hayden are both on Twitter. I'm located at BrendanAPG, and Hayden is located at Findale. That's FYEN_Dale. Feel free to engage with us on that platform. We love talking to everybody. And finally, a big shout out to all the Arsenal Pass Patreons. Thank you all so much for subscribing. It does mean the absolute world to us. And the Arsenal Pass Patreon does have tons of extra content. If you're interested in joining, including an extra pod every month, a live session, and of course, if we throw a deck tech up on the YouTube, we do have the Cyber Guide, deck theory, write-up, matchups, ratios, everything you need to pick it up, start being competitive on the Patreon side. Anyway, until next time, we'll see you in the next one.
See you later.